Welcome back to Pep Talk with David. Today we are covering one of the most frequently discussed peptides in the recovery and performance space, BPC-157. If you want to take a stab at its full name, it goes by the full name Body Protection Compound 157, and it has a reputation in certain communities as something close to a miracle repair peptide. I want to tell you that this is one that I have personally researched extensively. I have ordered it for research purposes, and it's one that I wanted to present to you very quickly at the beginning of this podcast because I do think that it has some very promising uses. So let's look at what the science actually says and where the science is and isn't with BPC-157. BPC-157 is a synthetic peptide consisting of 15 amino acids. It's derived from a portion of protein found in human gastric juice, specifically from a protein in the stomach lining. The parent protein is known as body protection compound, which is where the name originates. It is not a naturally occurring peptide in circulation in the way that GLP-1 is. The 15 amino acid sequence was identified in the stomach, but BPC-157 as a standalone compound is a research construct. So what does all of that mean? Well, the amino acid sequence is found naturally occurring in the stomach, okay? But it is not natural in the same way that GLP-1 is. What does the research tell us about BPC-157? Here's where we have to be careful and honest. The vast majority of BPC-157 research has been conducted in animals, okay? Rats and mice. But that doesn't mean that any of that is invalid. That's how all medical research starts. There are very few completed human clinical trials and none that have resulted in FDA approval, but that is not to say that we should not be considering the valid uses in humans. That said, the preclinical research is extensive and it has generated genuine scientific interest. Studies published in journals such as the Journal of Physiology, Paris, Biomedicines, and Current Neuropharmacology have shown that in animal models, BPC-157 appears to accelerate healing of tendons, ligaments, muscles, and bones. And it does this through several mechanisms. One is the upregulation of growth hormone receptors in our tendons and connective tissues. Another involves the promotion of new blood vessel formation, a process called angiogenesis. Can you say that with me? Angiogenesis, which is critical for tissue repair. A third involves modulation of nitric oxide pathways, which affect blood flow and inflammation. In animal studies, BPC-157 has been administered orally, by injection, and topically, and healing effects have been observed across all routes of administration, which sometimes can be unusual or surprising for peptides, since most get degraded in the digestive tract, okay, because of how much acid is floating around in there. They don't always have the same efficacy. But in this case, it seems like there is genuine efficacy. Some researchers suggest the gastric origin of the peptide itself may explain its oral stability, but this also remains a subject of study. Beyond musculoskeletal healing, animal research has also explored BPC-157 in the context of gut health and inflammatory bowel disease. Given its gastric origin, researchers have examined whether it protects the gut lining, reduces ulceration, and modulates gut inflammation. Results in animal models have been promising, but again, not yet validated in large human trials. There is also preclinical research on BPC-157's effects on the nervous system, including potential neuroprotective effects and interactions with dopaminergic systems. Some animal studies have looked at it in the context of traumatic brain injury and depression models as well. So why isn't there more human data? And before I tell you that, I want to say that in my own personal research, after several weeks of research, I asked the same exact question because it does seem incredibly positive, the things that I have seen. But a few reasons. First, BPC-157 has no patent protection because it's a naturally derived peptide sequence, which reduces pharmaceutical industry financial incentive to fund expensive clinical trials. Okay, follow the path of money, right? If there's not money and protection around that money, then people aren't as motivated. Second, regulatory pathways for peptides that aren't tied to a specific disease indication are also somewhat complicated. And third, because it's widely available in gray markets as a research chemical, a lot of informal use ends up happening outside of clinical oversight, which doesn't generate the controlled data needed for regulatory approval. But as I indicated there, a lot of this stuff gets purchased in these gray markets and utilized, and the general things that you will find out there seem to be very positive. So in the absence of large human clinical studies, what are the safety concerns or considerations? Well, in animal studies, BPC-157 has generally shown favorable safety profiles. No significant organ toxicity has been observed at therapeutic doses in preclinical work. However, we do not have robust long-term human safety data. This is one of the popular peptides that ends up bringing with it all these allegations around long-term human safety, okay? Because it promotes angiogenesis, there's a theoretical concern out there that's raised by some researchers about whether it could potentially accelerate tumor growth. We've seen this before. This has come up with other peptides, even those that we've already discussed on this show. That potentially tumor growth could occur if someone has an existing or undetected cancer already. This is a theoretical concern, however, not a proven one, but it's a reason that anyone with a history of cancer or cancer risk factors would want to discuss this with their oncologist before considering any such protocol. The other significant concern is the quality and purity of the available products. And this is something that goes for all gray market research peptides. BPC-157, sold as a research chemical not for human consumption, is not subject to pharmaceutical manufacturing standards, 503A lab standards. Contamination, incorrect dosing, and degraded product are all real risks that could be in the products that are on the market. Okay. So where does this leave us? Okay. BPC-157, to me, is a fascinating peptide with a compelling body of preclinical research suggesting its positive effects in tissue repair and healing effects. The science is not fabricated. It's real. It's peer-reviewed research, but it's overwhelmingly animal model research and not human research. However, if you're hearing extraordinary claims about BPC-157 from a buddy, a gym, a forum, the appropriate response would be, in my opinion, to approach it with optimism but caution. Ask questions like, where's the human clinical trial data supporting the claims? And bring the question to a licensed professional who can help you evaluate in your specific personalized context with your specific health profile. I do want to mention that with the cancer concerns, the same kind of evidence exists on the opposite side, which is to say that some of the healing effects, researchers will say that there could be cancer things that are positive for healing tumors. Now, again, none of this is substantiated, but something that I want to bring up nonetheless. Next episode, we're going to cover TB500, another popular peptide often discussed alongside BPC-157. So until then, talk to your doctor, stay curious, and come back for another Pep Talk with David.